Now, in the interest of full disclosure, I do need to point out before I go any further two things. Number one is I never have been a Jay Cutler fan. I never will be a Jay Cutler fan, and that's just the way it is. Number two is that after the 2008 season, I had long since figured out this is going back to 2005. I'm never really a fan of Rex Grossman either, for that matter. I'm very, very hard on Chicago quarterbacks because by and large, Bear quarterbacks suck very badly. We have a long, proud history of this. But after the 2008 season, I'm like, they need to do something. Something needs to change. I had long since figured out that Grossman sucked. I also figured out that you really weren't going to go past a certain point with Kyle Orton as your starting quarterback. They needed to make a move. They needed to do something big. They needed to shake things up dramatically. So, I was kind of on board with, to a small degree, them trying to go out and do something and make a move because I knew that Jerry Angelo had no clue how to draft a quarterback, see Rex Grossman. As a result, when word got out that Jay Cutler was going to become available on the trade market, I'm like, this is something the Bears have to make the call. They have to make the call. They have to see what it'll take. And to their credit, they did. And I was definitely intrigued when they actually pulled the trigger and brought Jay Cutler to Chicago. I'm like, wow. They're taking this seriously. Since they can't draft their guy, since they can't develop their guy, they're going to go out and try and get that guy. And I'll always give them credit for that. However, as soon as I heard the price tag that they gave up, which was 2 first-round picks, a third-round pick, and Kyle Orton, I'm like, wow. They gave up a lot to get a guy who has a lot of potential, but really hasn't realized much of that potential. That's a hefty price tag. And when you're bringing this guy in and you still have a lot of deficiencies on the offensive side of the football, whether it be at the skill position players or on the offensive line, you now run into the issue of, you bring in the guy that you want, but now you have the challenge of building around him without 2 first-round picks, without a third-round pick. I was just like, I think they gave up too much for him, and ultimately that was borne out to be true. But you're getting to the point now. This is Jay Cutler's 5th year in Chicago, 2013 season. After his first 4 years under Lovie Smith, Lovie was sent packing in part because of the failures of Jay Cutler as an NFL starting quarterback. Not the only reason, but that was one of them, beyond question. Ultimately, a coach and a general manager, their success and or failure hinges upon their starting quarterback. That's why Angelo was dismissed after the 2011 season. That's part of the reason why Lovie Smith, one of the reasons he was dismissed after the 2012 season. So they bring in Phil Emery, the general manager, brings in Mark Trestman to be the new head man because of his pedigree of working with quarterbacks, going back to Steve Young and Rich Gannon and what he did with Calvillo up there in Montreal in the CFL. And they're like, this is going to be the guy. This is the guy that could get the most out of Jay Cutler and help the organization turn a very necessary corner and become a much better offensive football team. But when you look at Jay Cutler, let's face the facts. In his entire career, since being drafted in 2006, he has 1 4,000-yard passing season. 1. He has 0 30-touchdown seasons. What he has is a lot of maddeningly inconsistent play and a lot of injury problems. Which brings me to the whole point of this video. Look, like I said at the beginning, I do not like Jay Cutler. I never have, and I never will. Frankly, I do not get why after so many years in Chicago where he has proven time after time after time that he cannot win big games against big teams, where he consistently shrivels up in big-time matchups, and up until this year, frankly, would piss it down his leg a lot of times in big-time and clutch situations, why so many people continue to defend Jay Cutler and make apologies for Jay Cutler and make excuses for Jay Cutler. It's this whole thing of, well, he doesn't have weapons or he doesn't have an offensive line. Aaron Rodgers doesn't have a great offensive line in Green Bay by any stretch of the imagination. There are many other quarterbacks that lack big-time premier weapons that seem to be able to get the job done, put up a 30-touchdown passing season or 4,000 passing yards, and that's the whole thing. You're getting to the point now where a 4,000-yard passing season is going to be the gold standard. It's not a 3,000-yard or 3,500-yard passing season. It's 4,000-yard passing seasons. This is Jay Cutler's 5th year in Chicago. And after this year, he once again will fail to have a 4,000-yard passing season. He once again will fail to have a 30-touchdown season. And you just get to that point and you're like, why do the Bears continue to want to tie themselves to this guy? Why do so many Bear fans continue to want to make excuses for this guy? Is it because of so many years of horrible quarterback play, which is, I think, a big part of it, that you don't want to admit that the Jay Cutler experience was ultimately a failure? Well, the bottom line is it has been. When you look at Jay Cutler's record against the Chicago Bears, for example, or against the Green Bay Packers, for example, over his time, he's 1-8, including an NFC Championship game loss in 2010 where he left because of a knee injury. You know, this comes into the whole thing of you're not allowed to question Jay Cutler in his toughness because he takes a lot of hits. He takes a licking and keeps on ticking. Yeah, until he gets hurt. Part of the thing with having a quarterback is not only do you need to have them play at a certain level, you need to be able to count on them and rely on them in certain situations. And one of those major situations is to be able to be under center every single game. And this will now be the fourth, and I emphasize again, the fourth consecutive year that Jay Cutler did not start all 16 games of the Bears season. His only season in Chicago that he started all 15 games was his first one in 2009, and that was so great with the 26 interceptions and everything. You know, you get to the point now. He's going to be a free agent at the end of the year. You look at some of the contracts that have been given out over the past year, whether that be to Flacco or a Romo or a Rodgers or a Ryan, and you start to really question, do you really want to tie big-time money, potentially anywhere between 14 to 19, 20 million of cap space every single year to a quarterback who is now 30 years old and that for the fourth time in the past 5 years has failed to play all 16 games in an NFL season? That has gotten you to the playoffs one time, that consistently plays poorly against good teams. Is that the guy you really want to hitch your wagon to? I said it back in draft time. I thought the Bears made a mistake by not drafting somebody like a Geno Smith in the first round. You might laugh at me and say, ha, ha, ha. Well, what the hell is the difference between the New York Jets and the Chicago Bears right now? There really isn't much, is there? I would rather have a Geno Smith as a 22-year-old rookie making all these mistakes, but creating some plays and be 4-4, as opposed to having maybe Jay Cutler as my quarterback and him, making some good plays and making some bad plays, and then having my team be 4-3 heading into a matchup against your bitter rival, the Green Bay Packers, a team that he is 1-8 against in his damn career. I mean, it's not like Jay Cutler is going to get a whole lot better. Quarterbacks usually, after the age of 30, do not, by and large, make tremendous strides and see big-time improvements in their game. What you've pretty much seen out of Jay Cutler is what you're going to get. It's not going to get a whole lot better. And it has been proven since the beginning of 2009 that Jay Cutler is not good enough to get the job done in Chicago. Jay Cutler is not a franchise quarterback, let alone an elite quarterback, and he most certainly is not a quarterback that you can win a Super Bowl with. And that would be proven out again this year, point blank, period. Forget all the other excuses about this or that or everything else. At some point in time, the quarterback's got to get the blame too. When things go well, the quarterback gets all the credit. But when things go bad, it's this excuse, it's that excuse, it's this reason, it's that reason. It's like it's anything and everything to deflect away any pressure or blame or criticism from Jay Cutler, a guy who has done a lot to clearly deserve it. To me personally, you're looking at the 2014 NFL Draft, which could be shaping up to be a really good draft, in particular for teams in need of quarterbacks. Me personally, I would rather take my chances at this point in time if I'm running the Bears with a 21, 22, 23-year-old quarterback that I'm tying a lot less money into, I'm investing a lot less cap space into, and I've got a lot more potential good years out of, than sitting there and giving Cutler some type of franchise tag or a long-term deal where I run the risk of tying up 10, 15, 20% of my cap space for the next 4 to 5 years for an inconsistent, middle-of-the-road NFL starting quarterback. At what point in time is the Bears organization going to realize that you have to move on? At what point in time is Phil Emery going to realize, holy shit, if I don't watch it, Jay Cutler could cost me my job too? At what point in time is Mark Trestman going to say, I have Cutler, he developed these bad habits over the years, why do I want to continue change him and try and fight these bad habits that he's developed over the years through coaching under Shanahan and Mike Martz and Mike Tice and when I could draft my own guy out of college, get him fresh, and I can mold him and create the habits that I feel are good habits that I want my quarterback to exhibit. Why would you continue to want to stick with Jay Cutler? Why? Why would you want to tie up that much money into a guy who's not even near Tony Romo's stratosphere, let alone somebody like a Matt Ryan or an Aaron Rodgers? Hell, he's not even really in Joe Flacco's league if you really think about it. I think about this. For the 5th straight year, Jay Cutler is going to fail to throw for 4,000 passing yards. He's going to fail once again to have 30 passing touchdowns in a season. Those numbers are going to start becoming the bare minimum standard of being a good NFL quarterback, not being the measure of a great quarterback. And Jay Cutler is not even meeting those minimum standards. And think about this. If you do tie up 15, 18 million a year in your cap space over the next 4 to 5 years into Jay Cutler, that's a bad business investment because you're paying a guy that much money with the hopes that not only he starts all 16 games, but he gets you deep into the playoffs. Because the more games you play, the more chances you have to make more money. And as a result, the better the return on the initial investment is. But if Jay Cutler isn't getting you to the playoffs, which he hasn't, except for 1 year, that was 2010, and we know how that finished. He doesn't get you to the playoffs, and he doesn't play all 16 games in a season. Why in the bluest of blue hells would you want to continue to tie your wagon to this guy? In a division where you play Aaron Rodgers twice a year, where you play Matthew Stafford twice a year, you see what franchise and elite quarterbacks look like. And you can clearly see and understand that Jay Cutler is not that guy. At some point in time, the Bears organization, in order to do what they're going to need to do ultimately, ladies and gentlemen, which is a complete and total rebuild and blow things up, they have to do it. I told you after last season they needed to do it. And all they were doing was punting the ball down the road, and they were still going to have to do it later anyways. The quicker you start it, the quicker you could be successful again. Now they've delayed it another damn year, and now they're a year behind the 8 ball. Jay Cutler must go. If you're going to rebuild your team, are you going to rebuild your team around a 31-year-old Jay Cutler, which is what it'll be next year? I don't think so. Is Jay Cutler really the type of team leader you want in a rebuilding situation? I don't think so. Is Jay Cutler really the type of leader you need out of a big-time NFL starting quarterback? I don't think so. Does he really actually have the talent to be a big-time franchise or elite NFL starting quarterback? Wake up, ladies and gentlemen, he's 30. He's not getting much better, and he doesn't play 16 games in a season, and only once has he made the playoffs as a starting quarterback in his NFL career. He's not that guy. It's time to admit it. It's time to accept it. It was worth the risk. It was worth the gamble. But at some point in time, for crying out loud, you have to realize when an investment is a bad investment, and you have to sell, sell, sell. The time is now. After the 2013 season, the Bears have the chance to walk away from Jay Cutler free and clear and say, no hard feelings. You go do what you need to do. Go make yourself money. Get a chance to start for somewhere else because you will be an upgrade for several other teams in the NFL. But it's time for us, the Chicago Bears, to move on. I hope Phil Emery understands this because if he doesn't, Jay Cutler will eventually cost him his job if his bad drafting doesn't do that. And I hope Mark Trestman understands that because ultimately Jay Cutler is also going to cost him his job. And I hope he realizes that. Jay Cutler must go for the long-term benefit of the Chicago Bears organization and the rebuilding project that they are going to have to undergo starting in the offseason. He has to go, and that's the bottom line.